Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into some fascinating ideas about education and the natural world? We're tackling Jean-Jacques Rousseau today. You've sent in some really interesting stuff. An article from Rose Sunset Journal really digs into his theories, plus a whole collection of his most famous quotes. Clearly, Rousseau speaks to you, and we're going to figure out why he's still relevant centuries later. Now, we often think philosopher, and we picture some stuffy old guy detached from reality. But Rousseau was far from that. Musician, novelist, even worked as a secretary and tutor. His life was anything but ordinary.
That's what makes exploring his ideas so interesting. It wasn't just theories in a vacuum. His own life experiences, like his love for nature, his criticisms of city life, it all fed directly into his beliefs. This idea that how we raise and educate children can either nurture their inherent goodness or, unfortunately, stifle it, it's a pretty radical concept, even today.
And when we talk about that inherent goodness, well, it's hard not to think about Rousseau's famous idea of the noble savage. The Rosa Sunset article really dug into that concept, but it's easy to oversimplify, right? It's not like he's saying all nature good, all society bad.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's way more nuanced than that. Rousseau saw nature as the ultimate teacher. But he wasn't saying we should just abandon society altogether. His point was that every single child, they're born with this incredible potential, this inherent goodness. And it's through experiences in nature, guided by their own curiosity, that they really learn and grow.
That makes me think about the analogy he uses, comparing a child to a plant. The Rosa Sunset article touched on that too.
Exactly. He says educators shouldn't be force-feeding information. They're more like gardeners, setting the stage for natural growth.
So it's less about dictating and a lot more about facilitating.
Exactly. And you know what's so fascinating? This focus on natural development, it didn't end with Rousseau. Think about Comenius, championing hands-on learning. Centuries later, John Dewey stressed experience in education. They were all picking up what Rousseau was putting down.
It's interesting you bring up experiential learning because that's a huge part of his book, Emile.
Yeah.
The article talked about how he advocated for raising kids in the countryside, away from all those corrupting influences of city life.
Emile is like his big experiment, his blueprint for how to raise a freethinker. And that countryside setting, that's key. Like with Emile's garden, for example. It's this carefully crafted learning environment that he sets up.
The article mentioned how Emile learns about property rights through his time in the garden.
Right. He plants his seeds, tends his garden, feels that ownership, and then boom, conflict. The gardener accuses Emile of stealing seeds. He's forced to deal with ideas of fairness, respecting other people's work. You could even say it's the start of understanding social contracts, and he figures it out by experiencing, not by someone telling him what to think.
It's amazing how he takes these huge ideas like property, social contracts, and makes them real with something as simple as a garden. Shows how much he believed in experience as a teacher. And it all ties back to that idea of encouraging independent thought, not just blind obedience. Like in that quote you sent over, one of his most famous ones, the only custom that one should try to give children is that of submitting to none. It wasn't saying we should just let kids run wild, was he?
Not at all. It's about raising critical thinkers. Individuals who can question the norm, not just blindly follow what they're told. Goes back to that belief in the inherent goodness of people, that we can nurture it, but society, it can corrupt that.
Makes you think about that other quote you shared, man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. Really captures that tension, right, between being free and the constraints of society. So how do we view Rousseau's legacy? Champion of freedom, radical educator, or is it both?
Oh, his ideas are definitely complex. They've sparked a lot of debate over the years. Like his view of nature, it's been challenged, and rightfully so. And his views on women, especially in Emile, let's just say they haven't aged well, not at all.
Yeah, an important point to bring up for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But even with those criticisms, you can't deny his impact. Rousseau wanted us to see the world through a child's eyes, understand their natural abilities and how much they want to learn. That was groundbreaking. He shifted the whole perspective. He urged educators to really consider the child's point of view, create environments that foster that natural curiosity, that love of learning. He was really passionate about that.
Sounds like he really did turn the world of education on its head. And whether you agree with everything he said or not, he makes you think. How much of who we are is nature? How much is society? How do we create those learning environments that nurture that inherent curiosity and love of learning that Rousseau was so passionate about? And if Rousseau could see today's education system, all the standardized tests, that one-size-fits-all approach, would he see it as a way to cultivate free thinkers? Or would he say we've strayed too far from those gardens of experiential learning he talked about? It's definitely something to think about. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It's been fascinating, to say the least.
Listen to more interesting podcasts on Planet Libra.